Okay, yes, so we're looking at the origin of the Karaniya Metta Sutta. So the Karaniya Metta Sutta, in some places it's described as the hymn of loving kindness, and I'll read it to you at some point this evening. It's where the Buddha describes the attitude of loving kindness that one can, how one prepares the ground by behaving well to other people, by being a sort of upright, decent human being, and then gradually just more and more bringing one's mind into a kind of field of kindness, a field of friendliness, and the Buddha sort of describes that as a journey, really, as a kind of a trajectory that doesn't really have an end, as ever more loving. And it's from that sutta, this hymn to loving kindness, that we have our meditation practice, the Metta Bhavana, in which we develop loving kindness for ourselves, a friend, someone we don't really know very well, someone we feel hostile towards, and then opening that out to all living beings. So that's like a central key Buddhist meditation, and it's a key fundamental attitude as well. So the meditation is a practice, and it describes the Buddhist attitude to ourselves, to life, really. It describes the Buddhist attitude to life, which is one that we can, the attitude that we can come into a sense of kinship with even those who are not kin. And I heard, I don't know if this is true, I feel like this isn't true. I heard someone say, I can't remember who, not that long ago, that the Buddha was the first person to teach loving kindness outside of a clan or family situation. That he was the first person who, as a religious teacher, who suggested that we direct our loving kindness outside of that group. Yeah. So whether that's true or not, I should probably take quite deep research to find that out. But I think it does suggest that quite possibly that attitude hasn't always been the case on planet Earth. That human beings' religious practices have often been about creating a sense of group identity, like ancestor worship or creation myths around who we are as a people, and that turning our attention to people who we're not invested in at all is a big act of self-disinterest. Does that make sense? That it's important. It's important because of this. It orientates our hearts, outside of self-interest and preservation of group identity. Yeah. So the famous line in the sutta is that where is it? Even as a mother protects with her life her child, her only child, so with a boundless heart should one cherish all living beings. Yeah, so that sense of family, of kinship, can be achieved to all humanity and beyond humanity as well. Yeah, so that's something about the sutta. So here's the story that has been related about how this sutta was taught. So it said that 500 monks received instruction according to each of their temperaments from the Buddha on meditation. Okay, so what you'll notice is if you start reading Buddhist texts is that it's always 500. There'd be 500 youths. They had 500 friends, 500 monks. So I think it just means a lot. I think if Dharma Night tonight ever gets written down in a sutta, how many of there are? It's about 40 or 50. Yeah, it will turn into 500. Exactly. So that's what I'll tell Sri Gupta. Dharma Night's doing very well. There's 500 people every night. So they've all had bit of individual intention from the Buddha. So he's given them particular meditation for each of their temperaments, and off they go to meditate. So basically, what we're going to do is we're just going to go through the text this evening. I'm not really sure where we get to, and examine what it reveals to us. So first of all, we learn, well, that the different temperaments need different kinds of meditation, and that in order to teach that to different people, you'd obviously have to have a close-ish personal relationship. So the Buddha has that with these disciples. He's given them particular meditations, and they went off to the foothills of the Himalayas to spend 4 months in meditation in the rains retreat. And so this is what they set off to do. These 500 monks, they got their instruction, and searching for a place, they wandered around, and they found, here we go, a beautiful hillock. And according to the commentary, it says, it appeared like a glittering blue quartz. It was embellished with a cool, dense green forest grove and a stretch of ground strewn with sand, resembling a pearl net or a silver sheet, and was furnished with a clean spring of cool water. So this is like this very picturesque and lovely place to meditate. So this is where they decided to spend their rains season. So this is what would happen. It's hard to travel around. The roads would get awash. You really wanted to find shelter during the rainy season. So they'd often spend much longer than normal in those times, settled and meditating. And they would go to the nearby town for alms. So this is what happened. And the people nearby were very happy. It's very auspicious to have these practitioners. So they were well supported with alms food, as well as this very lovely environment. So these are the characters so far. But then there are some more characters who, at first they're happy to see the monks, and then after a while they get a bit disturbed by them. And these are the deities of the trees. So the monks are all sitting beneath these beautiful, beautiful trees. And at first the tree deities were happy, because they thought they were only coming for a few nights. So they're like, great, yeah, meditate under my tree, you're welcome. And then after a while, they noticed that the monks weren't leaving, and they definitely outstayed their welcome. So apparently, how they lived was, above the trees there was a celestial mansion, and the tree deities lived there, and the trees were this celestial mansion was supported by the trees. So they were dispossessed, and they were wandering around. They didn't know, they didn't know what to do with themselves. Like, tree deities are very attached to their particular tree. They don't know what to do. They don't know what to do without it. So, very, very anxious and wondering when the monks would go. And they didn't go. So they had a little conflab, and they decided to frighten the monks away. So they did this by showing them terrifying objects. Making dreadful noises, and by creating a sickening stench. So very quickly this lovely place becomes hostile, and the monks go from feeling really relaxed and happy to feeling very, very uncomfortable. And they try and put up with it, but actually because remember, the objects are terrifying, and the noises are dreadful, so they get scared, and apparently they grow pale. They can't concentrate in their meditation, and they lose even their basic mindfulness, and they start like tripping over tree roots and dropping their begging bowl and things like that. So the vision's getting more and more terrifying, the smell's stronger. So they decide to go and see the Buddha. so normally it's a big thing to break your rainy season retreat. Normally you're there for the 4 months or so, but there's 500 of them. They can't cope, so they decide to go and see the Buddha to and maybe what they speak to the Buddha and then find somewhere else to meditate. That's what they decide. So it's quite a distance they have to walk, as the Buddha's staying at Savatthi, which is on the plains. So they're walking back from the foothills of the Himalayas onto the plains, and relate their terrifying experiences. And it says here they're pathetically requesting another place. And the Buddha says to them, go back to the same spot, monks. It's only by striving there that you will effect the destruction of the inner taints. So he's going to give them a teaching that's going to help them survive. And that's what he teaches. So he teaches them the Karanir Metta Sutta. Okay? And so normally when we think about metta, so metta, it's got the same, there's another word, mitta, which means friend, so they're related. And you might know the word maitri, so that comes from metta as well. So all these words are related. So you'd usually think of loving kindness or friendliness as being the opposite to hatred or ill will or anger. But in this case, the Buddha's teaching it as the opposite of fear, as the antidote, to fear. He's saying, you're frightened of these deities. Here, have this. And he says it will be a theme for meditation as well as a formula for protection. So 2 things. So really interesting. So he's teaching it as a formula for protection. So why do you think that teaching metta, loving kindness, the practice of loving kindness, or how is it a formula for protection? Any thoughts there? Why do you think this is what the Buddha's done? Yeah, Warren.
I guess it's like positivity and kind of like good deeds kind of push aside and repel negative karma and that sort of stuff. And I think I was taught somewhere that's what this golden thing encapsulating the Buddha here does. Kind of like shields you and protects you, like a little cocoon in like an egg of safety.
Yeah, that's a really nice symbol of it, isn't it? Yeah. Any more thoughts around that? Does it seem true that love could be a protection, or the practice of friendliness could be a protection against fear? Yeah.
I think fear can often come from like a distance. You fear the unknown, and you fear people that you feel kind of distant and other from. And I think metta tries to bring everybody into the kind of same regard and a close regard. So I think that in itself repels fear.
Yeah. I think that's really good, isn't it? Yeah. So fear is, it comes from what did you say? A sense of distance, and it creates more of a sense of distance as well. So I do. If you've ever been frightened, it definitely sort of contracts you, doesn't it, and pulls you away from the object of fear. Yeah. Any other thoughts or sort of elaborations? Does it make sense to you that this is this a good teaching, or is it a dodgy one? Yeah.
If someone shows me love, then I'm more likely to soften and maybe feel less afraid. Like the deities in the trees, hopefully they're going to feel less scared if they show love. Yeah. Hopefully.
Yeah, good. Yeah. I don't know if anyone's ever been the object of fear as well. So often we think of ourselves as the people who are fearful of this or that, but sometimes people are frightened of us for whatever reason. And I know my experience of that is not. It sort of puts distance as well if someone's for whatever reason. Sometimes when in our house, if I walk through the hallway without a light on, and then someone's at the other end, round the corner of the hallway, we sort of do that, and you both sort of recoil from each other. Yeah. Okay. So I think there's a couple of things there, aren't there? There's the fear and this sense of formula for protection, and there is also the Buddha saying, actually go back to the same place. So this beautiful place, he's saying, return there. It's really good for meditation. And I was thinking about this. How easy it is to find fault outside of, like, a good reason not to meditate, basically. It's very easy to find a good reason not to sit and meditate, much easier than to find a reason to sit. So, if you've ever tried to get a daily practice going, you'll know there's plenty of reasons to get on with doing other things that are more useful or just more exciting, more scintillating activities, and often we justify, like, oh, this is my favourite one, I'm too tired. I really believe it. If someone else says it, I don't believe them, but with me, it's really true. I'm too tired to meditate. But also, I notice this. This might be a particular personal habit, but I often find fault with my environment. And I was thinking about this in relation to going on retreat and going on a solitary retreat. So I try to go on a solitary retreat every year, and often, one, I haven't done what the Buddha suggested. I've never been back to the same place. And this is quite telling, because I've never found my celestial crystal Himalayan spot. But also, so what happens, the process is you look on various websites and you think, oh yeah, that's the one. That looks like a bit far enough away from people, cozy enough, like all the kind of list of personal criteria that one has. So you book your solitary retreat. With me, that kind of like a fantasy idea of how it's going to be amazing, this amazing place. And then you go there, and usually it's quite welcoming. You spend a bit of time, you've ordered your shopping or whatever, you're going to be there for a couple of weeks, so you've set yourself up well, Dharma books, chocolate, all of the necessaries. And at first I'm like, oh yeah, great. And then I start sort of like thinking, yeah, I wouldn't have painted that wall that colour. And I don't like the meditation equipment they've got, or honestly, why does the hut pointing that way when the really good view? And it's really boring, but I sort of have to watch myself redesign the whole place better, how I would have done it. And at the same time, just apply myself to meditation. And then there's even a phase before I've completely turned my phone off where I think, right, have I got everything I need, and should I buy? And I have to really discipline myself. Just stop it, Kusalasara. You're here now. You're just going to make the best of it. So there's this kind of process of I start practicing, but until that's reached a sense of settledness and depth, there's this kind of pull away from the place as well. That all of the reasons that or why I shouldn't meditate, or why I can't really settle, sort of manifest in this criticism of this particular place where I am. So that happens, and then sometimes also there's some places that are a little bit more spooky than other places. So that can happen as well. I'm not that scared of. So this is famous. So if you've ever been on a solitary retreat, you'll know about fear and solitude. There's various things that people get scared of, and the mad axe murderer, that's one of them. I'm not scared of that, because when does that happen? But what I am scared of is supernatural things. So they're really it's much more rational. As soon as it gets dark, it's really creepy out there. So there'll be a phase where I'm too, often the toilet's not in the hut or whatever. There'll be a phase where I'm too frightened to I just get really frightened about going out after dark. But generally that I sort of have to have a talking to about myself as well, with myself around that. Until I've kind of made peace with the environment somehow, all of these things can start sort of, bubbling up. So even though I don't know that much about tree deities and that kind of thing, I do recognise what the monks are going through in a certain way. I do recognise that. See where we can go from here. Well, okay, let's finish the story. As the monks neared their forest dwellings, reciting the Metta Sutta, they did a few things. So they were thinking and meditating on the underlying meaning. So they were reciting the sutta. So this is interesting, isn't it? Because I think one of the main things that we think about is that Buddhist practice is meditation. I don't necessarily think of Buddhist practice as reciting certain texts. In some traditions, that will be really, really obvious that that's part of it. But and how I was taught the Metta Bhavana was that you meditated on it. It's a meditation practice. The little bit of recitation that we have is that we repeat the lines, may you be well, may you be happy, may you be free from suffering, and may you make progress, or variations of that in our minds as we practice. But here they're chanting out loud, they're reciting the verses, and the hearts, so it says here, as they neared their forest dwellings, thinking and meditating on the underlying meaning, the hearts of the deities became so charged with warm feelings of goodwill that they materialized themselves in human form and received the monks with great piety. So they took their bowls, conducted them to their rooms. It's okay, so they've made some huts. I hadn't gathered that before. And just gave them a great deal of hospitality, invited them to occupy the bases of the trees and meditate without any hesitation or fear. Okay, so the deities carried on in this way. They completely welcomed the monks, and they continued for the whole of the rainy season to take care of them and to support them in their meditation practice. So just as the local people nearby who had been giving them alms food supported them and were happy, the deities took this attitude, and they also, not only did they stop making dreadful noises, but they also protected them. So they made the grove particularly silent, particularly conducive to meditation. And the monks did very, very well indeed in their meditation by the end of the rainy season. Every one of them had become an arahant, apparently, which means that they'd basically that liberated their minds. They were now enlightened. So, so maybe let's... before we'll have a tea break in about 10 minutes, but let's get into threes. And what we're going to just share whether you think, well, maybe, order my thoughts. Think of a time when you were frightened, and think, how would this attitude of loving kindness, how do you think it could have changed that situation? That's it. It could just be like a small bit of fear, could be something, quite recent, quite like a little bit of anxiety, or it could be something bigger. Yeah, just sort of something that you can get in touch with the time you're frightened, and how do you think this attitude of love and kindness might have helped you, or maybe it did help you. Yeah. Okay, great. So during the break, I had loads of thoughts. And I thought, anyway, we probably haven't got enough time this evening for all my thoughts, but yeah, I think this topic of fear and love is really interesting. So I've put a section of the verse of the Kanimitta Sutta on your seats, and we'll look. I'll tell you why I've done that a bit later, but you can take that home. But I thought I'd start by telling about two characters in the Buddha's life. So one person, I'll just tell the story really briefly. There was a serial killer around at the Buddha's time, and in his area, called Angulimala, and he was he was making a finger bone necklace, and he had 99, and he was looking for he wanted 100 on his necklace, 100 finger bones. So he's a really gruesome person, and the Buddha went down a spooky path one day, and everyone said, "Don't go down there because there's a serial killer in the area." And he was like, "Don't worry about me." So he went down, and of course Angulimala was lurking, and he started chasing the Buddha, and he somehow couldn't keep up with the Buddha. He was getting really frustrated because he was quite good at killing, and he was frustrated about like how he couldn't do this. And so he's calling after him, going, "Stop!" And the Buddha turned round and said, "I've stopped. Have you stopped?" And that encounter completely was arrested Angulimala, and he realised that he was in contact with something much bigger and much more mysterious than his own gruesome and selfish ambition. Yeah? So something about the Buddha's presence completely, it kind of shattered his worldview, and he was filled with remorse for the killing that he'd done, and he became one of the Buddha's disciples. Not only that, he became enlightened. So there's one person who was out to kill the Buddha. Another person that was out to kill the Buddha was his jealous cousin Devadatta, who seemed, I think he was a monk, and he seemed to be always trying. Well, he was miffed. There's a song, isn't there? My Perfect Cousin. I think I think that's what Devadatta felt like. The Buddha was like his annoying perfect cousin who was always outshining him. And so he wanted to do away with him. So even though he was a monk in the Buddha's Sangha, he was always trying to do away with him. And he did stuff like send mad elephants in the Buddha's direction, and like push rocks onto him and stuff. And the Buddha, well, it was different than with Angulimala, because the Buddha already had a relationship with Devadatta, and it didn't seem to be effective. So although the Buddha was not concerned about Devadatta's activities, he wasn't able to have an influence on him, a positive influence on him. The effect of him seemed to be more and more to rile up his cousin. I just thought I'd say that because, we're in the Buddhist centre, and the Buddha is our exemplar of loving kindness, like the boundless loving kindness, and he experienced actual threat to his life more times than I've just recounted it during his life, and not just threat to his life, but threat through violence, and yet it wasn't through fear that he escaped the violent end. It wasn't through fear. So I just thought we could hold that in our minds, because I think like the discussion, well, where we've got to is like, do we need fear to survive? Does love? I don't know. Does love make us foolish? Does it make us vulnerable? Does it mean that we're taken advantage of? And can we love and fear at the same time? I'm wondering that myself. So, yeah, maybe I'll ask you that. Do we need fear to survive? Yeah? Yeah? Which is different from, has fear helped you survive? Because that's probably yes, right? Yeah. No. No.
I don't get afraid.
Okay. That's lucky.
And I talked about an evening, before this evening, that was very horrible, and I didn't handle it very well because I don't get afraid.
Right. So you feel like fear might have helped you, or
no? It's the lack of fear, and I don't know. I think it's more along the lines of stupid dumb luck that able to pull through.
Well, you're very lucky if you don't get afraid. That's very good. Yeah.
It's an interesting question. I wonder if it's possible to, like, you know, when you're like, I don't know, maybe you're at the tube station and the train is coming in, and like you realize that you're over the yellow line and you take a step back, right? Like in that moment that you take a step back, I don't feel like I feel like the feeling of fear. It's more just like a really natural kind of like essential reaction, you know? It's like, okay, I've taken a step back, but maybe we can live in a way where we're protecting ourselves and performing those like protective actions without actually having to have the entire experience of like fear. But
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm sure some evolutionary scientist would tell me that I'm wrong, but maybe.
Well, we're in a Buddhist centre, so we can. Yeah, no, that's really good, isn't it? That's so you've got an instinctive reaction that saves your life, let's say, or keeps you safe, and yet fear's not part of it. So what's fear then? What's that? If we can do those instinctive reactions without.
Protection.
It's what?
Protection.
Protection, but Dash has just protected herself without fear.
I just feel like for me at least, like the core of fear is always just fear of the unknown. Like I don't think it's necessarily like an essential, like I was saying before, like reaction. Because whenever you're afraid of, maybe in that moment when the train is coming, you are terrified. It's like, oh my God, I almost died. It was horrible. Like, and you really sit and you think about what was I afraid of. When you say you're afraid of death, well, you're just afraid, but you don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I feel like there's a difference between fear and anxiety. And fear, as I understand it, is of a real and present threat.
Yeah.
So like a lion coming towards me to eat me.
Yeah.
Whereas it's anxiety if I am worried that in a dark hut there's a lion in the corner.
Yeah.
So that's an important thing for me when I think about fear, and on a physical level, keeping me alive. I thank my body for having fear and giving me fearful sensations, because it stops me from falling off the cliff or being eaten by the lion. But also, yes, I have a higher self which is capable of love. And so it's sort of holding these two things together.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that's good, isn't it? So the Buddha was actually under direct threat by his cousin and by Angulimala. So that was threats to his life. But the monks were not actually threat. The dreadful images and the horrible stenches that the deities were giving, that was more like phantom terror, wasn't it? That they weren't actually under threat, but yet they were frightened. So those are two kinds of fear that we can experience. Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, I was just thinking, I'm afraid of heights. It doesn't actually help me. Like, I would probably be safer if I wasn't afraid of heights, because I go really weird when I'm at the top of something. Like a start. Anyway, the fear is definitely like not helping at all the situation. I'm not foolhardy. I wouldn't jump off stuff or like tumble downstairs if I wasn't afraid of heights. But the fear is some kind of experience that overtakes me. That's probably a digression. I think there's something, isn't there? Like, I think Dash is on to something. Well, maybe I'm gonna say I think the Buddhist view is that fear, although it's a survival mechanism, it's not a necessary one if we have other characteristics in place. So love and awareness. There's nothing then to fear, and it doesn't. Both those things don't stop you from being aware of bad-looking people or dangerous situations. Do you see what I mean? So that would be the Buddhist position. Can we go along with that? Do we stop ourselves from loving in order to protect ourselves? Yeah.
I think that stopping to love in order to protect oneself, it can be a natural response, and I think that having the ability to love regardless of outcome and situation is more along the lines of a mindset that one would have to learn how to cultivate.
Yeah,
I mean, like,
that's really good.
I have a friend, she's lovingly scolded me out of frustration for my lack of slander towards certain people for their malice treatment towards me, and is quite perplexed how I have such a strong lack of rage and resentment towards certain people, and how I will speak of them more neutrally, and even though she even was horrible to me quite recently, and got quite teary-eyed, that I'm still quite open and affectionate with her.
Okay, so there's two different worldviews there. One
So,
is
there's
you're
the
saying
building up of resentment and being able to just give that up and accept people for who they are, and just love them regardless of action.
Yeah, no, that's really good. Yeah.
I think that maybe there needs to be like a distinction between like, so say you've got someone coming at you with like a dagger, right? And it's like, well, can you protect yourself, remove yourself from the situation and feel love towards that being? But then the question is, if you do experience love towards that being, does that imply also like acceptance and like allowing someone who's a threat to you in any way to kind of get too close to you in a way? I had a friend who liked to describe us individuals as kind of like our own little palaces with walls around the palace, and it's like you kind of take time getting to know someone before you kind of let them over the moat, and then you even more time to kind of come into the inner chamber, but you can still love someone profoundly who you very gently keep kind of outside, past the moat, past the outer gate. And so I think that if it's like some like judo or something, it's kind of like a very careful balance of like deeply loving while also like not necessarily like bringing that person into the core of yourself. And so maybe, I don't know, maybe that's where the real difficulty and challenge is.
Yeah. Well, I think what we're dealing with is there's us here who are learning how to do the metta bhavana, learning about loving kindness, and like apprentices at love, let's say. And then there's the goal, or what the Buddha was able to experience. So ultimately, what the Buddha experienced was complete love, which is a complete lack of defensiveness. And the reason that he had no need to defend is because he saw the delusion that there was a thing, a self, a man, a prince, who'd turned into a monk, who'd turned into an amazing ascetic, who'd turned into an amazing meditator. All of that was just a series of experiences that around which an identity formed, and actually there was no need for that identity whatsoever. And the minute that he saw through that there was an outpouring of complete unbridled, yeah, that will do. That sounds very passionate, doesn't it? Let's go with that. I was thinking there's sort of floodgates completely open. The only response to any living being, whatever their action, was loving kindness. So from that, there wasn't a lack of discernment about where danger lay, or even a lack of discernment where malice was. So he could see clearly what people's motivations were. He could see when people's motivations were pure and sincere, and he could see when they were trying to manipulate him. People would often try and manipulate him. They, in debate and things, they would often be trying to catch him out. He didn't lose any canniness, and probably he became more and more, his awareness was super sharp. So all of that would have been apparent to him. But because of this huge sympathy with other human beings, with the fact of mutual life, that was what everybody has in common, and a mutual desire for happiness. Nothing could stop that sympathy, even seeing other people's delusion, which can turn into evil behaviour. At its worst, Angulimala Devadatta. Often it was just pettiness and squabbling monks that he had to sort of deal with. The whole range of human behaviour. But behind that canniness and discernment was probably, just sympathy and a desire for others to feel the same freedom as him. So. I
keep thinking there's something around not so much fear, but sort of othering of people.
Mm-hmm.
And not knowing other people, kind of. But then if you were to think of all the stages in the metta bhavana, and think of that could be me, and you were saying, the separation between self and other, and sort of breaking that down.
Yeah.
And then that's kind of, because a lot of the time it's based in fear, isn't it? The othering of others.
Yeah, fear, othering, sense of separation, of pushing away, and fear, completely inextricable. Like they can't be separated. I don't think you can be frightened of someone else when you feel connected, even if you don't want them to kill you, and they might, or even if, day to day, that's not really what we're dealing with, is it? It's day to day. The things that we're frightened of, probably, they'll vary temperament to temperament, but they're often like things that we don't feel like we can quite say to somebody because we're afraid of their reaction, or conversation. It's often around communication. I think that's certainly the case in my life. And there's a sense of needing to protect. And where am I going with that? Well, the times that I can... hopefully this is helpful. This is more day-to-day example. The times that I can notice that there's a fear, and that fear is... there's no actual threat to my life. It's just a threat to my sense of myself in some way, that I can overcome that. That's something quite exciting, because then I think, well then my sphere of communication, my connectedness could be much bigger if I wasn't held back by those kinds of things. So that's my, the ideal is not to be frightened of death, whilst valuing life. For me, I'm working on not to be frightened of someone else snapping at me, or a conversation where I get a bit confused or get it wrong or something like that. Yeah. And I think it's all related to loving kindness. It's like, if I was sitting up here and felt that you guys were all really hostile, don't I wouldn't be able to speak very well. But the warmer the atmosphere, the more we can have this discussion and come together. Yeah, Sangadaran.
I was just thinking, when people kind of feel like they need to put up boundaries and protect themselves, quite often it is because they're scared of getting hurt.
Yeah.
But the more emotional positivity and the more metta we actually have, we're less likely to be able to be hurt by other people as well. So it's kind of like, if we have that strong basis of metta, then we don't have that fear of getting emotionally hurt by people, because we just know we've got a strong basis of positivity.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah, we often talk about metta being helping us with resilience, positive emotion. I think that story it really demonstrates that. And I'm definitely much less thin-skinned than I used to be, because the fears that I used to have about getting hurt is usually what someone thinks about you, isn't it? I think usually comes down to that. People think all sorts of things for all sorts of reasons. It doesn't really mean very much at all. Yeah.
I was interested that the Buddha said, "Stop. Will you stop?" So that felt to me like he set a healthy boundary. And in the text, it says here that the mother protects the child, and I was thinking about times when a child might reach out to hit the mother, and actually as an act of love and kindness, she sets a boundary and maybe holds their arms, helps them calm down. So I feel like the palace analogy is a really nice one, where we set these healthy boundaries as an act of love for others.
I think that's true. I think there's a provisional need to be careful. I think the Buddha wasn't setting a boundary. I think he was commanding Angulimala to change his motivations for life. So he was saying, stop killing people, stop chasing after whatever you're chasing. I've stopped already. I no longer have craving. He was able to do that because he didn't need boundaries, because he has no deluded sense of self to defend. Meanwhile, we need to be a bit more, I don't know, I'm not going to say to you, if you get in danger tonight, just turn towards with love. I'm going to say, be careful. Well, hopefully you won't. Do you see what I mean? That yeah.
I mean, both of both of those could exist at the same time. We have animal instinct to survive and that kind of thing. I think before we really become very, very further along with our practice, I think we'll always have that, and then I think that's designed in a way. But I think in the meantime we could choose how we respond. That's always the way. And if we see some danger, you will respond. You will physically protect yourself. But in the meantime, you will. For me, for example, if I see some bad news or something, I'll be thinking about my first instinct would be thinking, that perpetrator or something, someone's son or someone's daughter, and then I'll immediately think, how come he end up like this?
Yeah.
It's kind of a love that I will try to cultivate. Under of course I will be sensible and all that, but it's the thing that try to work out how we respond, even though someone come at us with some malicious intention.
Yeah, that's really good. Yeah, exactly. Like, we've got the tools with the metta practice to take someone in for more than just the one action, and fill them out. Okay, one more point.
Because I also think there's something interesting there about conditions, and the more that we understand the effect that conditions have, the more we can realise that the person coming towards us with a knife, or the person that's being harmful, is just a product of their conditions. And if we had the same conditions as them, who's to say we would act any differently in that place?
Yeah, exactly. So sympathy whilst getting out the way. Yeah, exactly. Okay, there's a whole area. What I'd like us to do is to have a go at the metta bhavana. So, and that's how we'll end. What I've taken. So one of the things that's emphasised in the story is that the monks are not only doing the practice, and reflecting on the meaning, but they're also reciting it. So I've just taken one verse, which I think is the pivotal instruction in a way from the Karaniya Metta Sutta, and I thought you could just take it home, and if you want, like on the bus or whatever, you could learn these verses so that they're there in your mind, and just see if that works, or just even the first line, or the second line. So with a boundless heart should one cherish all living beings. Like, does that, if you have it in your mind, does that feel like a way to protect yourself, or a way to relate to the world? What effect does that have on you? So that's like home, to take home. In the meantime, we'll finish with the metta bhavana, where we'll bring to mind, with an attitude of friendliness and warmth, or even ardent friendliness. One of the ways that metta's described is it's incandescent, and it burns and shines and blazes forth. So we'll turn our minds to each of the people. I'll say the type of person in each of the stages for those of you who don't know it so well. And just before the practice starts, Sanghadharan's going to read the whole sutta for us. Okay.
This is what should be done by one who is skilled in goodness and who knows the path to peace. Let them be able and upright, straightforward and gentle in speech, humble and not conceited, contented and easily satisfied, unburdened with duties and frugal in their ways, peaceful and calm and wise and skillful, not proud or demanding in nature. Let them not do the slightest thing that the wise would later reprove, wishing, in gladness and in safety, may all beings be at ease. Whatever living beings there may be, whether they are weak or strong, omitting none, the great or the mighty, medium, short or small, the seen and the unseen, those living near and far away, those born and to be born, may all beings be at ease. Let none deceive another, or despise any being in any state. Let none, through anger or ill will, wish harm upon another. Even as a mother protects with her life her child, her only child, so with a boundless heart should one cherish all living beings, radiating kindness over the entire world spreading upwards to the skies and downwards to the depths, outwards and unbounded, freed from hatred and ill will, whether standing or walking, seated or lying down, free from drowsiness, one should sustain this recollection. This is said to be the sublime abiding, by not holding to fixed views, the pure-hearted one, having clarity of vision, being freed from all sense desires, is not born again into this world.
Okay, so I hope you've enjoyed what I think is a really magical story. I just thought I'd just kind of summarise it again, that what happens is these terrifying objects in the monks' minds, by the practice of the metta bhavana, get turned into protective and supportive energies that help their minds turn much more to deeper concentration and towards enlightenment. So I hope that you can experience a bit of that in meditation. And I thought I'd also say, I didn't finish my solitary retreat story, so I get scared. And then by the end of the retreat, well, I was critical, scared. But what happens at the end is, and I think a lot of people experience this, just as like a deep harmony and gratitude with one's surroundings. The last retreat that I went on, it was rained a lot, and I remember just standing under all these trees thinking, here's a tree and it's protecting me, and I've got waterproof shoes. How amazing. The world becomes completely benign and feels like everything's there to support one's practice. Okay, so I wish you an enjoyable journey home, and I'll see you next week. We're carrying on different stories from the Buddha's time, different suttas. So join us for this series.
Thank you.